Senator Leyonhjelm to take the podium. Thanks.
Thank you, Sophie. Fellow senators, important people, the one or two people who don't fall into either of those categories. I had planned to argue today that despite what you people say, we crossbenchers are nothing like the aliens from the bar scene in Star Wars. I was going to argue that we are not even weird, we're actually just regular people, and therefore the Senate does not need reforming. But then I heard Nick and Jackie would be here, so allow me to try another line of argument. Spend a moment or two to have a sly look at the person you're sitting next to. Do you really know what their views are? Who knows what outlandish and depraved ideas are flowing through their weird minds? So what is normal? Maybe the only difference between us, crossbenchers, and you weirdos, is that we tell you what we think. You might not agree with my ideas. You might prefer the ideas of Nick or Jackie. This is fine. After all, as a libertarian, I support your right to make bad decisions. But most of all, you'll recognise that we bring new ideas to the Parliament. Unlike Nick and Jackie, I belong to a political party without my name on it, the Liberal Democrats. Mind you, sometimes I think the David Leyonhjelm experience would make an excellent name for a political party, rather than just a phrase used mockingly by former girlfriends. In the meantime, if you want to sign up, you need to go to ldp.org.au. And if you're not sure, there's a little quiz there that helps you decide. It's surprising how many people discover you can support personal freedom without being a tree-hugging socialist. The policies of the Liberal Democrats are based on classical liberalism, which owes its origins to the Scottish Enlightenment. Every time, every time a meddling government makes a bad decision, takes our money, wastes it and interferes in our lives, we're proven right. In other words, every day of the week. Here we are in 2015, and the government still wants to know if you have the right combination of genitals before it will allow you to press them together in holy matrimony. It disapproves of adult smoking so much, it is attempting to tax it out of existence, while a black market springs up under its nose. It will soon have all your phone and internet data collected in a convenient place so both it and hackers can snoop on you more easily. Then make you pay for the privilege. Our way of thinking is new to people who have not yet figured out that the divisions between left and right are irrational and arbitrary. If I talk about letting people decide for themselves whether to smoke tobacco, people think I'm a right-wing nutter. But if I say the same about marijuana, I'm a left-wing loony. If I suggest we let gay and lesbian people do what they want, I'm a lefty. But if I support four-wheel drivers, fishers and hunters, I'm a conservative. When you understand that issues like these are not of the left and the right, but the relationship between individuals and the state, you will understand us. Which brings me to the Orwellian-sounding Senate voting reforms. It's hard to overstate the importance of getting our voting system right. The wishes of the people at the ballot box need to be honoured. Taxation cannot be justified without representation, and people have fought and died for what democracy brings. But the proposed Senate voting reforms are not democratic. The Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters was comprised of members of the Coalition, Labor and the Greens. Fairly obviously, they did not like the election result. The key recommendation is to replace group voting tickets with optional preferential voting above the line. The same system is used in New South Wales for the upper house, although preferences in that state's lower house are also optional. In addition, 21 candidates are elected, not 6. Because of New South Wales, we know what will happen with optional preferential voting in the Senate. It will wipe out the minor parties and keep the major parties in power. The Senate will be permanently deadlocked between the Coalition on one side, Labor and the Greens on the other. The only crossbencher who would survive is Nick, who votes with the Greens and Labor most of the time. For evidence that the major parties are serving themselves and not democracy, consider this. There is no proposal to introduce optional preferential voting for the House of Reps. If genuine voting reform was really the aim, the agenda would include optional voting and optional enrolment. And we acknowledge that optional preferential voting involves unwitting voters losing the full power of their vote. At the last election, around 25% of all the votes in the Senate were for minor parties and independents, leading to the election of 6 new crossbenchers and Nick's re-election. So only 18% of senators elected at that time were from minor parties or independents. The objective of any reform to Senate voting should be to reflect voting intentions more closely, not do a stitch-up. There are 226 senators and MPs in the federal parliament. The 226th person from whom you would seek advice about democracy is a vociferous supporter of optional preferential voting. I won't go into Lee Rhiannon's history here, but let's just say that some of her political idols did for democracy what Ivan Milat did for hitchhiking. But we should not be surprised that Rhiannon's instincts allow her to get on nicely with some people on this committee, or even that, having struck a deal on pensions, the government is contemplating a deal with the Greens to get rid of their annoying minor competitors. Labor has seen the danger of supporting reforms that would lock them into a permanent embrace with the Greens. But talk of the government and the Greens in bed to each other is even more disturbing than the coupling of Cheryl and Gareth, or for those of you from WA, Troy Boswell and Adele Carles. I'm not here to defend my crossbench colleagues, not all of them anyway. Some, and I'm not mentioning any names, are indeed a bit alien. But if optional preferential voting becomes a reality, the government may look back at this time as the good old days, a time when the aliens were friendly at least some of the time. Labor will look back at it as someone who would view the period prior to an arranged marriage. And the Greens will remember it as the time they convinced enough people that they were less alien than we are. Thank you.